After millennia orbiting Mars, a massive asteroid named Pi is now hurtling toward Earth, expected to collide in 8 years, a catastrophe that could spell the end of humanity. As global panic spreads, the United Nations convenes to address the looming crisis and grants China the authority to launch an initiative called the United Nations Moon Shield, UNMS. The ambitious plan involves constructing a vast lunar base, developing an advanced nuclear weapon known as the cosmic striking hammers, and using it to obliterate Pi. The moon's orbit would then serve as a protective shield, deflecting the asteroid's debris and safeguarding Earth. Yo applies for a position on the Moon Project, but his self-description as an average man fails to impress the interviewer. Rather than securing an engineering role, he's offered a maintenance job instead. Determined to be part of the mission, Yue accepts without hesitation. Soon he joins a crew of astronauts on their journey to the moon. Over the next 8 years, the team works tirelessly, overcoming countless challenges. At last, they launch the superweapon, and when it successfully fires, they erupt in joyful celebration. But Yue's mind is often elsewhere, on Langsing, the base commander he secretly admires. In his free time, he practices how he might confess his feelings, rehearsing words he can never quite get right. He's always by the door when she returns, hoping for a glance or a smile. Yet to Langsing, he's just another face in the crowd. One quiet evening, Yue sits in his room, with music playing softly, struggling to craft the perfect confession letter. At the same time, Langsing receives devastating news. A powerful solar storm has knocked one of the missiles off course. As a result, fragments of the asteroid have slipped past the moon's orbital shield. In just 27 minutes, those fragments will strike and destroy the base. Langsing instantly sounds the alarm and commands everyone to evacuate. However, Yue, wearing his headphones, remains oblivious and stays in his room. The other astronauts scramble into the evacuation rockets and ultimately abandon the moon. It's only when Yue glances out the window that he realizes what's happening. He jumps into a vehicle and speeds toward the launch site, noticing that all the rockets have departed, except for one. Yue accelerates, desperately trying to use the radio, but the incoming debris interferes with the communication system. Spotting a crater ahead, he chooses to jump it rather than go around, but miscalculates and crashes into it. At that exact moment, Langsing launches the final rocket, leaving Yue behind. Stranded, Yue climbs out of the crater just as the asteroid debris begins slamming into the moon's surface. He sprints toward the base, weaving between falling rocks as the facility starts to break apart around him. Now Yue is forced to dodge the collapsing pieces of the base as it comes apart around him. He's knocked down once, scrambles back to his feet, and attempts a daring leap into the crater for cover, only to be struck again and knocked unconscious. While he lies motionless, a massive asteroid fragment hurtles toward Earth. When Yue finally comes to, he groans in frustration and tries to contact the UNMS. Just then, the asteroid fragment slams into Earth, unleashing a colossal explosion that devastates a huge portion of the planet. Yue can only stare in stunned silence as he realizes that 8 years of tireless work have been reduced to nothing. In the aftermath, he returns to the ruined base and repeatedly tries to contact Earth, but no one ever responds. For 6 days, he continues to call out, hoping for a voice, a signal, anything. But the silence remains. The devastating truth sinks in. He is the last human alive. The weight of this realization begins to erode his mental state. In a final act of grief, Yue gathers scraps of paper and decorates a room within the base, creating a funeral to honor the memory of humanity. The base still holds enough food to sustain 300 people, a lifetime supply for Yue. He decides to finally pursue his long-held dreams. Frustrated, he grabs a board and starts sliding across the moon's surface for fun. Days go by and Yue becomes obsessed with cracking the password, trying over and over until it begins to drive him to the brink of madness. In the end, he gives up and uses a bomb to open the door, which also blows off his clothes. Now that he can get to Langsing's uniform, he makes a fake version of her and sets up a fancy dinner with romantic music so he can tell her how he feels. He even starts kissing the fake version, not knowing someone is watching. It turns out there are still people alive on Earth, and now Langsing feels really embarrassed in front of her teammates. People are hiding in underground shelters, while the astronauts are staying at the UNMS base below the surface. After working hard, They've managed to connect to the base on the moon, but they can only see Yue on camera. There's no sound because the radio is broken. Since Earth doesn't have enough resources right now, it will take 2 years to fix the communication system and even longer to bring Yue back. The head of UNMS decides to share the news. The asteroid hit has cracked Earth's plates, which has caused huge waves that flooded 30% of Earth's land. Cities are covered in volcanic ash and poisonous gas, so soon there won't be any plants or animals left. In the underground shelters, people are trying to grow plants in jars, but it's hard without sunlight. Sickness and sadness are spreading among the survivors, who only get very basic food to stay alive. Some people are even starting to lose their hair. The chairman thinks they should start showing Yue's life on the moon as a live stream to give people a bit of hope in these dark times. Since there's no sound, they decide to hire someone to act as Yue's voice and make him seem brave and strong. Langsing announces to let all the survivors know that they've found someone living on the moon and that a live stream of his life will begin in 30 days. Some people don't believe the news and quietly disappear. A few weeks later, Yue falls into a deep depression and decides to self-delete. He heads to the warehouse to get medicine for it. But in the hallway, he sees an open food package that he didn't leave there. Confused, he opens the warehouse door and is stunned to see a beautiful shape lying down. Thinking it's a woman, Yue starts flirting as he walks closer, only to realize it's actually a kangaroo that was left behind by the research team. At the same time, Langsing starts the live stream. On the moon base, Yue reads some research about kangaroo and learns that he's aggressive and always hungry, which explains why he's been stealing food. Yue picks up a shovel and goes back to the warehouse to get the medicine. When Kangaroo shows up behind him, Yue tries to scare him off with the shovel, but it breaks. Kangaroo grabs the handle, bends it easily, and then starts beating up Yue. Later, Yue puts on a costume to look like a female kangaroo and tries to distract Kong. Just as Yue is about to grab the medicine, Kong tackles him, trying to do the naughty with him. The mask falls off and Kong kicks Yue out of the warehouse. A few moments later, Kong starts moving into other parts of the moon base. Suddenly, Yue shows up again with a Gatling gun he just made using a 3D printer. He starts shooting plastic balls at Kong while running around the base. But then Kong quickly turns and starts chasing Yue instead. As the voice actor plays a flute to make the scene feel epic, Yue and Kong begin fighting each other, hand to paw. After a tough battle, they both fall to the ground at the same time. The UNMS gets worried and tries to contact Yue again. When Yue finally wakes up, he hears static on the radio. He doesn't say anything, but he cries because he thinks it means there are still people alive on Earth. Yue and the UNMS don't know that the strange signal was actually caused by Kong's tail hitting the cables. Yue and Kong look at Earth and realize they might have a way to go back. They decide to stop fighting, even though Kong still gives Yue a punch. More than 200 days have gone by since the event, and Yue keeps sending a message to try to reach Earth. He and Kong have settled into a routine, and Yue says they've become like a family. Since it's clear that Earth won't be coming to rescue them, Yue decides to fix up the old Apollo 18 spacecraft, hoping he can use it to fly home in it. While people at the UNMS talk about whether they can help him too, Yue and Kong drive off and quickly find the Apollo. Yue runs some tests and confirms it can work with some repairs. They bring the Apollo back to their base, and people on Earth watch as Yue works hard on fixing it for several days. The UNMS is impressed, so they check his profile and realize he's actually an engineer who somehow ended up doing maintenance work. After a while, Yue discovers that the Apollo can only carry 22 pounds, and Kong weighs much more than that. Feeling like he has no other option, Yue takes Kong for a ride and leaves him alone in the middle of the moon. But Kong runs after him and quickly gets back into the car. When they return, Yue starts looking into ways to build a stronger engine and finds out that a prototype of the superweapon is still stored at the old base. Yue and Kong pack up supplies and head out in the car, only driving during the day because it runs on solar power. It will take them weeks to reach the old base, which is on the other side of the moon. People on Earth are worried that Yue might not make it, since the moon only gets sunlight for 14 days each cycle. Soon, the UNMS figures out that Yue has been driving the opposite way, chasing the sunlight to stay powered. The trip will take longer this way, but at least Yue won't get stuck without power. Now he has 41 days to reach the old base and can only sleep 4 hours a day. At first, Yue and Kong keep each other entertained, but over time, the long journey starts to wear them down mentally. One day, Yue wakes up and sees Kong driving and talking, But it turns out he was just dreaming. After accidentally crashing into a crate, they finally arrive at the old base. Yue soon finds the warhead and carefully brings it down. Suddenly, Kong starts pressing a button over and over, and Yue panics. But luckily, it's only the inspection button. While they're getting ready to head back, Yue, feeling frustrated, locks Kong in the trunk to keep him from causing any problems. He then starts driving to the base, playing music to keep himself focused. Because of the music, he doesn't hear when the trunk accidentally falls off. Hundreds of miles later, Yue finally realizes that Kong is missing, but turning back would mean losing the sunlight he needs to keep going. At first, Yue keeps driving, but the guilt becomes too much. He turns around to rescue Kong. People on Earth cheer for his choice, and a happy Kong licks Yue to thank him. Yue and Kong keep driving without stopping to sleep, so they don't lose the sunlight. After staying awake for more than 50 hours, Yue and Kong notice that the sunlight is slipping away from them, but they don't give up. They speed up instead. As the sun fades, the temperature drops, and Yue has to turn on the heater to keep from freezing, which drains the car's battery even faster. With only 35 miles left to the base, the battery finally runs out and the car stops. Yue loses hope and steps outside, ready to accept the end. Yue sits by the car, staring at a picture of Lansing taped to a mirror and thinking of her. Kong notices the reflection and starts chasing the light like a cat. This gives Yue an idea. He rips the car's door off and uses his tools to turn it into a sled, then attaches it to Kong. Yue shines a light in front of them, and Kong starts chasing it, pulling the sled across the moon's surface. After a while, they reach a huge gap. Yue makes Kong jump over it and uses gas tanks to help launch them to the other side. Everyone on Earth cheers with hope and excitement. An award is waiting for Yue when he returns. People feel inspired and start working hard to fix buildings, and pictures of Yue and Kong are put up in the bunkers. Thanks to this effort, the UNMS is able to restore contact with the moon base in just 3 months. It's been 516 days since the incident, and Yue is still trying to reconnect everything. It's taking longer than expected because the Apollo equipment is very old. One afternoon, Yue gets excited when he hears static on the radio again. But when he looks over at Kong, he finally sees him playing with the cables. Yue checks the wires himself, and when he realizes the signal was fake, something in him breaks. All his hard work and suffering feel pointless. He thinks he really is the last human left. He yells at Kong in frustration, then falls back into deep sadness. Back on Earth, the UNMS still needs another month to finish fixing the communication systems. Refusing to give up, Lansing speaks through the loudspeakers to everyone still in the bunkers. Lansing asks all the survivors to turn on their flashlights and shine them toward the moon to show Yue he's not alone. At that same moment, Yue opens his helmet and starts to lose oxygen. But then, people all over Earth light up the sky with flashlights and even lighthouses, proving that humanity is still alive. Yue sees the glowing Earth, falls to his knees and cries. Finally, on day 613, the UNMS finishes fixing the communication systems, and Yue sees a human face for the first time in a long while. After the celebration, he spends his days talking with the team. They found the Apollo blueprints and help him figure out how to connect the old systems to new ones. Now Yue gets to see Lansing every day, and he feels like they're becoming friends. One night, after all the repairs are finally done, Yue opens up to Lansing. He tells her that he had originally turned down the maintenance job and walked out of the interview. But on his way out, he saw her, and her smile made him change his mind. Touched by this, Lansing shares something of her own. During the evacuation, she did see Yue on the crater, but she left anyway because trying to save him would have gotten everyone killed. She admits that if faced with the same choice, she would make it again. Meanwhile, far out in space, something is moving toward Earth. The next day, Yue and Kong board the Apollo and finally leave the moon. There's some turbulence at first, but they soon reach orbit and people on Earth celebrate their success. In just a few hours, the Apollo arrives safely at the lunar station. Yue and Kong start searching for the escape pods. But then Earth receives terrible news. Another large chunk of the asteroid that has been drifting near the moon has been knocked out of orbit by surrounding debris, and it's now headed straight for Earth. They name the asteroid Pi Plus, and it's big enough to wipe out what's left of humanity. The team realizes that the only person who might be able to stop it is Yue. But to do that, he would have to fly the warhead straight into the asteroid, a mission that will likely cost him his life. Lansing volunteers to speak to him and starts a live stream to talk to Yue directly. But Yue has already heard everything. They accidentally left a mic on. He's already made up his mind. He's willing to go because he wants to protect Langsing and everyone else still alive. As the survivors are told to return to the bunkers, Yue breaks down in tears and says a heartfelt goodbye to Kong before sending him back to Earth in an escape pod. Then Yue takes off in the Apollo, only to discover that there's a field of meteorites between him and the asteroid. Yue focuses hard on flying the ship to avoid being hit as the Apollo speeds up. But even so, the ship gets hit and starts spinning out of control because one of its thrusters is broken. Yue doesn't know what to do, but luckily Langsing has an idea. He needs to open the door so the air rushing out can help stop the spinning. The door is stuck though, so Yue kicks it until it finally opens. This works and the ship stops spinning. Then Yue sees the ship's engine floating away. The Apollo has no power left. He realizes he has to move the warhead by hand. Before he goes, Yue tells Langsing he doesn't blame her for leaving him behind and asks her to livestream his final moment. Then Yue leaves the ship and gets the warhead ready. As he works, he gives a heartfelt speech to say goodbye to humanity. People all over Earth cry as they watch him use his jetpack to guide the warhead toward the asteroid. At the same time, Kong's pod lands safely in the ocean. As Yue spends his last moments, he sings. The pressure near the asteroid breaks his suit, but he doesn't give up. When he gets close enough, he asks Langsing, who is crying, to trigger the bomb. A huge explosion destroys the asteroid. Survivors come out of their shelters and watch the falling pieces light up the sky, knowing they're finally safe. But they also know Yue is gone. More than 10 years go by, and people have been working hard to rebuild Earth and make it beautiful again. There's still a lot left to fix, but at least they can now breathe fresh air and live outside. The chairman has retired, and Kong has a statue built in his honor. He now lives with other kangaroos in a safe reserve. Meanwhile, Langsing travels with a new team of astronauts to the moon to clean up the old base. While there, she imagines Yue standing beside her, watching as the remains of Pi Plus form a glowing ring around the Earth. And with that, the movie concludes.